What if I told you some criminals were so calculated, so creative, they turned crime into an art form? We've all seen the dumb criminals, the guy who falls asleep during a robbery, the thief who posts stolen cash on Instagram. Yeah, being a criminal isn't exactly rocket science for most people. But this is different. Today, we're looking at 7 of the most intelligent, or maybe the most imaginative criminals in modern history. Not geniuses in the academic sense, but masterminds when it came to planning, execution, and thinking 10 steps ahead. And at number 7, we start with a crew that operated like something straight out of a Hollywood script, the Pink Panthers. If you've never heard of them, you should. They are considered the largest and most successful jewel theft network in the world, and they're still active. For over 20 years, they've pulled off robberies in more than 37 countries. The estimated total? Over $500 million. That's not petty theft. That's global-level precision crime. They earned the nickname the Pink Panthers after a robbery in London in 2003 at the Graff jewelry store. During that heist, they hid a stolen diamond ring inside a jar of face cream, mirroring a scene from the movie The Return of the Pink Panther, where a jewel is hidden in shaving cream. The name stuck, and apparently they embraced it. When police arrested some members, they found Pink Panther stuffed animals in their hotel rooms, almost like they were enjoying the game. But don't let the playful nickname fool you. These aren't smash-and-grab amateurs. Yes, security footage usually shows a few guys smashing display cases and running out in under 3 minutes, but what you don't see is what happened before that. 2 to 3 months of surveillance. They stay in nearby hotels. They study employee routines. Who's distracted? Who's careless? Who takes smoke breaks at predictable times? They use hidden micro cameras to record the inside of stores so they can map everything out: entry points, blind spots, the fastest exit routes. Every variable is calculated. In one case in France, before robbing a jewelry store, they painted a public bench across the street and put up a sign saying "wet paint," just to prevent anyone from sitting there and witnessing the robbery. Think about that. They controlled the environment before the crime even started. Their robberies typically last under 3 minutes because they only target the most valuable items. No wasted motion, no hesitation. And here's the part that makes them even more unusual. Despite often carrying weapons, they have never fired a shot. Not once. They intimidate, they move fast, but they avoid unnecessary violence. One of their most brilliant operations happened at a jewelry fair in Switzerland. Before the event even opened, members posed as workers and replaced the bulletproof display glass with regular glass, claiming it was damaged. So when the fair began, all they had to do was walk in, break the glass easily, grab the jewels, and disappear. No resistance, no delay, just execution. And when it comes to buyers, they're even more serious. Anyone who purchases stolen jewels from them gets one clear warning. If you talk, if you reveal a name, if you cooperate with authorities, you're dead. So far, that threat has worked. Several buyers have been identified over the years, but none have been willing to testify. Fear is part of their system. And then there's Japan, their fastest and most expensive job. 30 seconds, that's all it took. They walked in, put on masks, filled the store with tear gas, grabbed the two most expensive pieces worth millions, and left on bicycles. Not armored trucks, not helicopters, bicycles. But don't think that's the only method they've used. They've escaped by speedboat, by helicopter. They've disguised themselves as women. They've exploited unexpected distractions in real time with lightning-fast adaptation. They don't just plan, they improvise. That's what separates them from ordinary criminals. They don't rely on luck. They rely on preparation. And that's only number 7. What if I told you one of the smartest robbery crews in Europe didn't use explosives, didn't use guns, didn't even step inside the store? All they needed was a drill and a vacuum cleaner. Sometimes the most brilliant crimes aren't complicated, they're simple. Since 2006, an unknown crew in France managed to steal nearly $800,000 from the Monoprix supermarket chain, using nothing more than those 2 tools. No Hollywood-level hacking, no Ocean's 11 theatrics, just physics. Here's how they did it. First, they would break into the building after hours, not through the front door, but through the walls or ceilings near the cash storage area. Then they drilled a hole just big enough to fit the hose of a vacuum cleaner. That's it. Once the hole was made, they turned on the vacuum and literally sucked the cash out. Think about that for a second. Instead of manually grabbing stacks of bills, which would take time, create noise, and increase the risk of getting caught, they engineered a shortcut. Once the hole was drilled, the money was gone in seconds. Clean, fast, efficient. And they repeated this method over and over again, 15 times, the exact same technique, same chain, same weakness, same result. What makes this story even more unbelievable isn't the creativity of the criminals, it's the response of the company, or lack of one. Over 6 years, after losing nearly $800,000, Monoprix reportedly didn't change their security system. 6 years, 15 identical robberies, no structural reinforcement, no redesign of cash storage, nothing. It's almost hard to believe. Either upgrading their security system cost more than the losses, or someone severely underestimated the criminals' persistence. And here's the most fascinating part. This technique was only ever successfully against Monoprix locations, which suggests something very specific. The flaw wasn't in supermarket security in general, it was in their system, their layout, their design. The criminals found a pattern and exploited it with surgical precision. No violence, no confrontation, no dramatic chases. Just a drill, a vacuum, and a weakness nobody bothered to fix. Sometimes intelligence isn't about complexity. It's about identifying a flaw that everyone else ignores and exploiting it until someone finally wakes up. And this was only number 6. Number 5. The tunnel job. And this one feels like it was written by Hollywood, except it wasn't. In 2010, a group of thieves pulled off one of the most cinematic bank robberies in recent European history by digging a tunnel straight into a bank vault. Yes, they went underground. The target was a Credit Lyonnais bank branch. The perfect opportunity presented itself when the bank temporarily closed for minor renovations. Security was reduced, less foot traffic, fewer eyes. That's when the crew made their move. They didn't start inside the bank. They started in the basement of a nearby property. From there, they began digging, slowly, carefully, strategically. We're not talking about a small hole. This was a functional tunnel, reinforced enough to prevent collapse, mapped precisely to reach the vault location. Think about the level of planning that requires. They needed blueprints, they needed structural knowledge, they needed time, and above all, patience. For days, possibly weeks, they worked underground, inch by inch, moving dirt, avoiding detection, making sure no vibrations would raise suspicion. Eventually, they broke through, right into the vault area. But here's where things didn't go exactly according to plan. The operation was supposed to be silent, controlled, invisible. Instead, a security guard inside the building heard unusual noises. He went to investigate, and that's when he saw them. Before he could trigger the alarm, the thieves overpowered him, knocked him unconscious, and tied him up. No gunshots, no chaos, just speed and control. With the bank now effectively neutralized, they entered the vault. And what they did next was systematic. They opened over 100 safe deposit boxes, jewelry, cash, valuables, personal treasures people believed were untouchable. Gone. And they weren't finished. Before leaving, the crew set fire to the vault area. Why? To destroy fingerprints, to erase DNA, to complicate forensic analysis, to create confusion. By the time authorities arrived, the scene was partially burned, chaotic, and difficult to reconstruct. The thieves vanished. No arrests, no confirmed identities, no solid leads that led to anywhere. To this day, the case remains unsolved, which raises an unsettling question. How do you dig a tunnel into a major bank, break into over 100 safety deposit boxes, assault a guard, set the scene on fire, and disappear without a trace? This wasn't reckless, it wasn't impulsive, it was calculated, engineered, executed with military-level precision. And the silence afterwards, that's almost the most impressive part, because sometimes the smartest criminals aren't the loudest. They're the ones who move underground, literally. And we're only halfway through this list. Number 4. The 300 million yen heist. And this one man, one uniform, 0 suspects. In 1968, Japan experienced one of the largest and most embarrassing robberies in its history. and it was pulled off by a single individual using nothing but authority and psychological manipulation. Here's how it happened. 4 employees from the Neon Shintaku Bank were transporting 300 million yen in cash. At the time, that was an enormous amount of money. Adjusted for inflation today, roughly 7 to 8 million US dollars. Normally, only 2 employees handled these transfers, but recent bomb threats targeting banks had made everyone nervous. So this time, they doubled security. 4 employees, an escort, everything seemed secure. Until the escorting police officer pulled them over mid-route. He approached the vehicle calmly. He told them he had just received an urgent warning. There was a bomb planted underneath their transport vehicle. Imagine that moment. You're responsible for millions of dollars. You've heard about recent threats, and a uniformed officer tells you there's a bomb under your truck. Panic sets in. The officer instructs them to step away from the vehicle for safety. They comply. Of course they do. He kneels down to inspect underneath the truck. Moments later, thick smoke begins pouring out from under the vehicle. The employees back up even farther. From their angle, they can't clearly see what's happening. They just see smoke and a police officer doing his job. Then suddenly, the officer jumps into the driver's seat and speeds off. By the time they realize what's happening, he's gone. The smoke, a flare. There was no bomb. There was no emergency. And that officer, he wasn't a real cop. He was an imposter. The level of confidence required to pull this off is almost unbelievable. He didn't use force. He didn't threaten anyone. He used psychology, authority, timing, and fear. And then he disappeared. Japan launched one of the most massive investigations in its history. Nearly 200,000 police officers were mobilized, roadblocks, interrogations, surveillance. They investigated thousands of suspects. They searched relentlessly for the stolen vehicle. Nothing. No arrest, no confirmed suspect, no recovery of the full amount. To this day, the case remains officially unsolved. The statute of limitations eventually expired, which means if the thief is still alive, he could legally step forward tomorrow, write a book, go on television, start a security consulting firm, and face no prosecution. That's how clean the execution was. One man convinced trained bank employees to hand over millions without drawing a weapon. No violence, no chase, just a uniform and absolute confidence. Sometimes the smartest crimes aren't about force, they're about control. And this one was psychological warfare disguised as a traffic stop. And we're not done yet. Perfecto. Vamos a darle un tono más cinematográfico, más oscuro y más emocional. Este caso lo permite mucho. Adaptado totalmente a audiencia estadounidense, con hook fuerte y ritmo tipo documental premium. Aquí va el número 3. Number 3. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum Heist. And this is the holy grail of art theft. March 18, 1990, Boston, 1:24 a.m. 2 men dressed as Boston police officers ring the buzzer at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. They tell the security guard they're responding to a disturbance call. There was no call. But it was St. Patrick's Day weekend. The city had been chaotic all night. So the guard made a decision that would go down in history. He let them in. That single choice opened the door to what would become the largest unsolved art theft in the world. Once inside, the officers told the guard that there was a warrant out for his arrest. They asked him to step away from the security desk. That's when everything shifted. The two men overpowered him. They called the second guard to come over. Both were restrained, handcuffed, duct-taped, taken to the basement, and left there. For the next 81 minutes, the fake officers walked through the museum undisturbed. No rush, no panic. They knew exactly what they wanted. When they finally left, they had stolen 13 works of art, including masterpieces by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Degas, and Manet. They also took smaller objects: a bronze eagle finial from a Napoleonic flag, a Chinese beaker. Odd choices, not random, intentional. The estimated value today, over $500 million, $500 million. But here's what makes this case different. It's not just about the money. These weren't replaceable assets. Some of the paintings were 300 to 400 years old. Cultural history, irreplaceable pieces of humanity's artistic legacy, and they vanished. To this day, no one has been arrested. No artwork has been recovered. The investigation is still active. The FBI believes the thieves were connected to organized crime in the Northeast, but no definitive proof has ever closed the case. And in one of the most surreal twists in art crime history, the museum has publicly issued statements not to the public, but to the thieves, explaining how to properly store and preserve the stolen artwork. Humidity levels, temperature control, light exposure. Because if those paintings aren't kept in the right conditions, they will slowly deteriorate. It sounds absurd. Imagine being robbed and then releasing preservation instructions to the criminals. But this isn't just theft. It's cultural preservation at stake. And here's something even more haunting. If you visit the museum today, the empty frames are still hanging on the walls. They were never replaced, never removed. The empty frames remain exactly where the paintings once hung, a permanent reminder of what was taken. It has become part of the museum's identity, almost like a ghost exhibit. And there's a reward: $10 million for information leading to the recovery of the artwork. $10 million. So yes, if your neighbor happens to have a 17th century Rembrandt hidden in their basement, your retirement plan might be solved. But decades later, the mystery remains. Who were they really? Where did the paintings go? And how do you sell $500 million worth of world-famous art without anyone noticing? Sometimes the smartest crimes aren't about speed. They're about patience, about knowing that some things are too famous to sell, but too valuable to ignore. And the silence, that's what keeps this case legendary. Number 2. The vault that wasn't supposed to be breakable. At the beginning of this video, we talked about the Pink Panthers pulling off cinematic robberies. But this was different. This was bigger. One man, known publicly as Leonardo, masterminded a diamond heist worth over $100 million. And the vault he targeted? It was considered impenetrable. We're talking about a high-security vault equipped with a 3-ton steel door, heat detectors, a radar system, seismic sensors, motion detection, multiple layers of physical and electronic security. This wasn't a jewelry store display case. This was the kind of vault designed to survive a war. And yet, 6 months after first seeing it, Leonardo was ready to break in. At first, even he believed it was impossible. That's what made it irresistible. For half a year, he and a small, highly specialized team planned every detail. Not amateurs, experts. One person focused solely on disabling electronic sensors. Another worked on duplicating the vault keys without raising suspicion. And perhaps most impressive of all, a diamond dealer involved in the plan constructed a full-scale replica of the vault, a practice vault, so the team could rehearse over and over. Why? Because certain motion sensors had to be disabled from inside the vault itself, meaning once you were in, there was no room for error, no improvisation. Every movement had to be measured, every step calculated. They studied timing, angles, blind spots, pressure points. This wasn't just a robbery, it was an engineering project. The night of the heist, they executed the plan with surgical precision. They gained access, they bypassed the systems, they entered the vault, and once inside, they opened more than 100 safety deposit boxes. Diamonds, gold, jewelry, high-value assets stored by people who believed they were untouchable. By the time authorities realized what had happened, the crew was gone. The diamonds were never fully recovered. The gold, gone. Most of the team vanished. Leonardo was eventually arrested, but here's the twist. The conviction was largely based on circumstantial evidence. No mountains of stolen diamonds found in his possession, no dramatic confession. He received 10 years in prison. 10 years for orchestrating a $100 million heist. For some people, that math makes sense. What makes this story legendary isn't just the money, it's the preparation, the patience, the audacity of looking at something labeled impenetrable and deciding it was simply a puzzle waiting to be solved. Because sometimes intelligence isn't about brute force, it's about obsession. 6 months of study, rehearsal, precision, all to defeat a system that was supposed to be unbeatable. And somehow, they did. And we're down to number 1.
Number 1. D.B. Cooper. And this one? This is American legend. November 24, 1971. A man using the name Dan Cooper, later misreported as D.B. Cooper, boards a Northwest Orient Airlines flight from Portland to Seattle. He's calm, well-dressed, dark suit, tie, sunglasses, trench coat. He doesn't look frantic. He doesn't look nervous. He looks deliberate. Once the plane is in the air, he hands a note to a flight attendant. At first, she assumes it's a phone number. Maybe he's flirting. She slips it into her pocket without reading it. Then he leans closer and quietly says, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." She reads it. Inside the briefcase on his lap, he claims there's an explosive device. He instructs her to sit next to him. He opens the case slightly, just enough for her to see what appears to be wires and red cylinders. Whether it was real or not, no one knows. He makes his demands clear: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, no funny business. The flight lands in Seattle. The FBI gets involved. Authorities make a decision. They comply. The ransom is delivered. The parachutes are delivered. And here's where it gets interesting. Cooper releases all the passengers. He keeps only the pilot, co-pilot, 1 flight attendant, and a flight engineer on board. He checks the money, confirms the parachutes, and orders the plane back into the air. At this point, everyone knows what he's planning. He's going to jump. 2 military fighter jets quietly follow the aircraft. Inside the cabin, Cooper gives specific flight instructions: fly low, fly slow, landing gear partially deployed. Somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, in the dark, in the rain, over dense forest, he lowers the rear stairway of the Boeing 727 and he jumps into the night with $200,000 strapped to his body. And then he vanishes. No confirmed body, no confirmed sighting, no arrest. For decades, the FBI investigated thousands of suspects. Nothing definitive. Years later, a young boy digging along the Columbia River discovered bundles of cash, deteriorated but identifiable by serial numbers. The same serial numbers recorded by the FBI before the ransom was handed over. So at least part of the money survived. But did Cooper? That's the mystery. Some experts believe he couldn't have survived. It was freezing. He jumped at night, in a business suit, into wilderness with limited steering capability. Others argue he knew exactly what he was doing. Maybe he had military parachute training. Maybe he had scouted the area. Maybe he planned the drop zone. And here's the part that divides opinion. Everything up to the jump? Brilliant. Calm execution, psychological control, minimal violence, a clean exchange. But the parachutes? Why request parachutes from the very people you're threatening? Could they have been sabotaged, tampered with? Why not bring your own? Why trust your life to the authorities you just extorted? Some argue the FBI wouldn't risk giving him a faulty chute because he asked for 4, possibly implying he might force someone to jump with him. Smart move or reckless gamble. That's what makes this case legendary. Was he a criminal mastermind who escaped into myth? Or was he a desperate man who miscalculated one final detail? The FBI officially closed the investigation in 2016. The case remains unsolved. D.B. Cooper became something rare, a criminal who turned into folklore. No confirmed identity, no confession, just a silhouette in the sky. And maybe, somewhere, an old man who smiles every November 24th. Because if he survived, he pulled off one of the boldest disappearances in American history. So what do all these stories have in common? The Pink Panthers, the vacuum crew, the tunnel diggers, the fake cop in Japan, the Gardner Museum thieves, Leonardo, and the impenetrable vault, and D.B. Cooper. They didn't rely on chaos, they relied on preparation, on psychology, on identifying weaknesses most people never notice. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Intelligence doesn't equal wisdom. Planning doesn't equal morality. And being clever doesn't mean you win in the long run. Some of them disappeared. Some of them went to prison. Some of them may have died trying. But every single one of them made one decision that changed their lives forever. And that's what makes these stories so fascinating. Not the money, not the diamonds, not the art. The mindset. The audacity to look at a system built to stop you and believe you can outsmart it. So here's the real question. Were these people geniuses, or were they just gamblers who got lucky? Let me know what you think. And if you enjoy deep dives into real cases like this, the intelligent ones, the reckless ones, the ones that feel like movies but are very real, make sure you subscribe. Because the next story, it might be even darker. Hit like if you made it all the way to number 1. And I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious.